Whether you've been in IT service management for 5 minutes, 5 years, or 5 decades, I bet you've been in some sort of service governance meeting, and either you, a colleague, maybe someone senior has referred to the business. As in the business that your department provides services to, like some mysterious entity that consumes your work but isn't apparently you. I've always found that a little bit odd. We work in the same organization, chasing the same goals, yet we talk about the business. I need to stop doing this, as if it's some sort of distant relative we see twice a year. And even stranger, we use it as a blanket term for anyone and everyone who consumes a service, regardless of what they do, what their objectives are, or what service or technology they actually need. And here's another point within IT itself. We're also consumers. When I rely on the infrastructure or network teams to enable my service, am I now part of the business? It's an odd dynamic, but not really surprising. This whole separation, IT versus the business, comes from, I think, the traditional operating models that most technology teams have worked under or had in place for decades. So let's get into this a little bit. In a typical IT or digital department, you can probably break the structure down into a few layers. At the base, at the core, you've got your technology focused teams, your infrastructure teams, your networks, your applications, database teams, the people who keep the lights on and who get the tickets from the desk when something breaks, those guys that are focused on the operations and maintenance of those services. Then, alongside them, there's usually some sort of delivery function where projects live. Now, sometimes these delivery teams are embedded within the same discipline, a network ops team that also runs network projects. Um, but most of the time, there's probably a separate sort of project layer with project managers, PMOs, delivery leads, that sort of thing. So above that sort of core nucleus, if you like, you've then got multiple control, assurance, design, strategic layers, stretching from your service desk and service management teams, probably something around risk, obviously security. Then you've got architecture, design authorities, relationship or account management roles, senior leadership determining strategy, and etc. etc. All of these sit between the operations and delivery engine, where, let's face it, all the real magic happens, and the business, shaping, assuring, and governing how services are delivered and improved. Sure, these operational and delivery teams might get pulled into a service review now and then or a design playback, but most of the time it's someone else talking to the business on their behalf. And that's where the problem starts. Because when teams are buried 3, 4, 5 layers down deep in the structure, they're far too removed from the people actually using the services that they provide. It becomes almost impossible to co create value when you're not close enough to understand what value really means to those consuming it. Now, information can get filtered as it travels up and down the chain. Feedback can take days or weeks to reach the people who could actually act on it. And priorities get interpreted, translated, sometimes lost altogether. So instead of shared ownership of outcomes, you end up with a supply chain where each link is just doing its part without a full view of the end to end purpose. And that's where we end up with the language of the business wants or IT will deliver, because structurally, that's how it's been set up to work. Now, a solution for that, I think, is where product oriented operating models come in. It's not about collapsing all of the layers or pretending we're one big delivery team, but I think it's about being crystal clear on who your customer actually is and owning the outcome of the value you provide to them. Now, again, let's take infrastructure and networks, for example. Not necessarily their customers are the wider business or end users. They're most likely more to be the application or platform teams who rely on their capabilities to enable them to deliver their own products. Those application or product teams in turn have their own customers, often business departments or external users. So instead of a loose supply chain where everyone's just supporting the business, there's the rabbit ears again, each team understands who they serve directly and what outcomes they're accountable for. And that, for me, I think is the heart of the product model. Now, each product owner owns its demand, its roadmap, the prioritization of that roadmap, and everything to do with delivery and support, all within guide rails set. They work directly with their customers, whoever they happen to be. Sometimes that's another IT team, as I said. Sometimes it's somebody in the business. But the accountability and the relationship sits in one place, and that's with the product owner. So, given this channel is focused pretty much around service management, where does service management fit into all of this? Because this is where people like us can sometimes get a bit nervous. Traditionally, service management was smack bang in the middle of everything, owning processes, approvals, governance, any and all conversations with the business. But in a product world, that kind of middle layer shrinks. We move from being a bottleneck to being a guide. Our job isn't to approve every change or run every incident. It's to find the guide rails that enable the product teams to deliver safely and to deliver effectively. Think of it like setting the definition of done for every product, setting the boundaries within which the product owner and their team can operate within. If something falls outside those boundaries, say from an architectural or security point of view, then the product owner would be seeking guidance from the relevant authorities or decision makers. But day to day, they're empowered to act within those guide rails and not simply wait for someone to hand them permission to get on with stuff. Now, rest assured, service management doesn't disappear in this model at all. It simply evolves. Like I mentioned in my last video, we're still monitoring that conveyor belt. We're making sure work is flowing as it should, that nothing falls off, and that the process is being followed. But we're not accountable for fixing what's on the conveyor belt. That's down to the product teams. Our role is to make sure that the flow keeps moving and the outcomes are achieved in line with expectations. And as I said last time, I think that's what ITIL 4 was really getting at. Value streams, flow, outcomes, all that stuff we talked about in the last video. The product teams own the delivery. Service management owns the framework, the guide rails that help them do it correctly. And this is where the mindset shift happens. We stop being the department that serves the business and start being the function that helps organizations deliver value together. So next time we're in a meeting and someone says the business wants, let's pause and think, are we really talking about them and us? Or should we be talking about them and us? Or are we just describing another part of the same organization trying to get value out of technology? I think the more that we cling to that language, the harder it is to shift towards these modern product-led ways of working. So to wrap up, maybe it's time we stop talking about the business altogether, because the moment we do, we're still thinking in silos. And if we're serious about being part of a product-led organization, we have to stop seeing ourselves as suppliers and start acting as partners in delivering value. Because let's face it, it's going to be very difficult for the business to do it without us. That's it for today. If you've already started moving towards a product model, I'd love to hear how your service management function is adapting to that. Drop a comment, share your experience, and always, thanks for watching. I've been Gareth at Switch It Off and On again. See you next time.